All right, everyone, welcome back into CIO Insight here on thepulsenetwork.com. I am Tyler Piber. Now, we're going to be talking about innovation, and we're going to be talking about innovation within your IT teams. And of course, to do that, we welcome in the editor-in-chief of CIO Insight, Susan Nunziata. Susan, it's been a week. How have you been?
Great, Tyler. How are you?
I am doing very well, thank you. So, but before we get into this, kind of explain to me a little bit what went into the this slideshow, this article on CIO Insight.
Well, we hear a lot about the changing role of the CIO and the need to create an innovative IT organization, the move away from infrastructure and service-oriented approaches to more of a leadership role in changing the way that business operates. And so with those ideas in mind, we decided to go ahead and pursue this slideshow and help CIOs to kind of determine the best ways to nurture and define innovation in their teams.
So Susan, it's Eric. How you doing?
Doing great.
Saw you in San Francisco last week. But innovation's one of those things that everyone agrees that it's a good thing. But how do you actually go about from taking this concept of innovation to actually come up with steps that you can do with your team to make them more innovative?
Well, I think there's a couple of approaches, and one of the most important things is to really encourage and reward risk. One of the things that stifles innovation is a risk aversion, a fear that your job will be negatively impacted if some great idea that you have fails. And so I think one of the important steps is to create a culture in which those who take risks, even if they fail, still get some reward, some recognition and acknowledgement. And so you need to kind of change the way that you might approach your organizational hierarchy and how your teams are rewarded and compensated.
So do you think that that's, endemic in a U.S. business, that a lot of times while everyone champions innovation, if you mess it up, you get fired? And there's a fear that you shouldn't take the risk. You're better off not doing it. Is that one of the things holding back innovation, do you believe?
In certain sectors, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, certainly in the large tech companies here in Silicon Valley and in many other places, that type of culture does not exist. And obviously you can see how they reap the benefits of creating an innovative culture. But for the average organization, say financial services, insurance, even healthcare, there's a lot on the line for the average CIO and the average IT executive that can make it very challenging to put forth these ideas and put your neck on the chopping block.
Susan, I'm curious. I mean, whenever someone talks about innovation, I always find that it seems to me that when you're in the place of work, you're kind of static. You feel like you're there, you go to work, you do your job, you go home. How important is it to, see what other people are doing, what other companies are doing as well, to kind of maybe spark that interest a little bit?
That is absolutely essential. It's one of the keys. I think keeping a broad open mind and a natural level of curiosity and encouraging that across your teams is absolutely essential, so that you can look to how innovative practices work in other organizations. And maybe not all of those things will work for you, but if you can implement some of those tools and some of those practices, then I think you'll be ahead of the game. And everyone wants to stay ahead of their competition. And so the best way to do that is through innovative practices and policies that encourage out-of-the-box thinking on your teams.
Susan, it's right around Halloween. So I've got to ask, how can a CIO, fight back the attack of the zombie bean counters who, they hear of a project, they want a ROI attached to it, they want the financial spreadsheet, they almost want a sort of a guarantee of success. How do you work around that?
Well, talk about a key innovation killer there. I think that there has to be a culture above and beyond what the CIO is able to accomplish. A lucky CIO is going to work for an organization in which the leadership from the CEO and the board of directors down does allow for you to take at least some measure of financial risk. Without that level of support, it is very hard to operate in a vacuum and drive the kind of innovation that the company needs. But one way to do this is to work with your business colleagues in developing ideas that make the most of technology, but also deliver bottom line results. And so I think, the other aspect of innovation that's important and often overlooked is the idea of bringing in multiple stakeholders into the conversation, getting different brains around the table to say, okay, how can we come up with ideas that benefit everybody and benefit the organization? And then that makes your upsell a little bit easier to try and take some of those risks.
And how easy is it, or how important is it to bring in, I guess what you'd say, non-traditional parts of the company into these projects? Maybe you're doing a social networking piece and you really want the kids right out of college who have sort of grown up with social networks to be able to say, okay, this is how it's going to fit into my business. So how do you go about creating a broader sphere of people involved in these types of projects?
Well, I think that's absolutely essential. And I think one of the bigger mistakes is to look only to other senior executives to bring into the mix in terms of figuring out where directions should be. And I think that, to encourage that kind of communication across all levels of the enterprise is so essential and so rarely done. There are lots of tools that purport to help us collaborate in these ways, but it really needs to be a cultural shift. And so engaging all levels and all players across the organization is important. I think you almost have to act as kind of an internal diplomat, a liaison across all of these groups in order to come up with, an ability to listen and really learn from the experiences of everyone in your organization.
Well, there you go, Tyler. Internal diplomat. That's sort of what
I was going to say, that's
as.
kind of like what I am.
Yeah.
And Susan, before I let you go, the one thing I have to ask when I'm looking at this is, it seems like we can build a lot of teams out there, and you could build your IT teams up that they all have that one mindset. How important is it for them to be complementary to one another in order to kind of really, okay, one has that risk-taking idea while the other person says, well, here's the realistic part of that. Kind of make sure that the teams are complementary skills, if you will.
I think that's really important. I think you need to have that combination of skills. The danger comes in when you're having a brainstorming session and the person that's there to be the realist shoots down every idea. And so I think, you need to kind of manage that. It's important to have all of those team members, but it's also important to manage the whole process so that when it's appropriate to brainstorm, the brainstormers get to do that. And when it's appropriate to have the reality check, then those folks get to say their piece and everyone gets heard and everyone's input is valued, but it needs to be done in the right manner to really be effective.
No, I don't think so, Susan. That's shut down. I'm not allowed. No, I'm only kidding, of course. That's what it is. Susan, hey, it's always a pleasure having you on. Great stuff as always.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Really cool stuff. Susan Nunziata of CIO Insight, the editor-in-chief of CIO Insight. We're going to take a break, though. We've got a lot more CIO Insight coming your way. You're watching it right here on the Pulse Network.